Mic check. Mic check. How y'all doing? Let me just phase out this music. We're not going to need music today. Instead of music, we have CCP Psych with us today. Psych, can you say something so I know that that the sound is working?
1, 2, 3.
Perfect. Chat, let me know if you guys can hear Psych well in chat. Those of you that are not still paying attention to the AT more than my stream, because I know some of you are double watching right now. All good, perfect. All right, so yeah, thanks all for coming, especially you, CCP Psych. So you know, I don't want to beat around the bush. We had invited Ratati a couple of weeks ago, and Ratati had a personal thing come up, and he sent the probably the best replacement that he could have sent. Oh, geez, those are loud alerts. Let me take those down. Hold on. He sent the best replacement he could have. I'm sure you would agree, Psych. But you're a director of economy and systems. So for everyone here that that has maybe not seen you before, can you start by just explaining what your role is at CCP? And thanks again so much for taking the time.
No, thank you for having me here. So I guess my role is kind of dual, you would say, in CCP. Mainly, I'm responsible for the in-game economy, make sure that everything is running the way it's supposed to be running, that the ecosystem is in what we want to call a healthy state, or make sure that at least that it's not broken. But at the same time, I'm leading the product side of what we used to call the Living Universe segment. It's one of the three major teams we have that gave you last November's Factional Warfare update. Mostly changes that have to do with industry, taxation, market, and what we call the grander sandbox, I guess. But yeah, you could say that it's a dual role.
Yeah, it's pretty much everything that traders like me and everyone playing in the market gets very nervous about when things get changed, or if they're bold, they get very happy about, because that's you know, that's typically when opportunities open themselves in the markets in EVE Online. I always when I you know, we you and I talked at the last fan fest, and I've had a couple of discussions with you here and there, and I've always thought that the biggest challenge you would have is to balance the player experience on the one hand with, you know, running a healthy economy on the others, because just like in real life, that doesn't always fit together. Can you talk about that? Like, first of all, is that a correct assessment, and also, you know, how do you deal with that?
No, that is, I think that's the biggest task. How do we make sure that everything is put together in a way that both it makes sense, it creates a good experience for the players, and at the same time it fulfills. I would say after 20 years, what Eve has established itself about in the gaming industry, the robust economy, which is player driven. So we can get it back into that in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
The first part I think is the most interesting. Player behavior. We anything we do, you guys gonna break it. So what the main task, I guess, is make sure that we create enough fail safes, we create enough frames around the things that we create in the game, so that if something is broken, it's not to a degree that it will hurt the what we call the core of the game, at least when it comes to the economy. And it's what I usually say every time to my designers when they create a new market, when there is a new thing coming out, a new ship, something that doesn't really exist, a new resource maybe. It's the one time to get it right, or make sure that you not overshoot, because it's always easier to fix it one step at a time. But if, and history has proven that, I guess, if you overshoot by a lot, then the longer it takes for you to fix it, the longer the problem will be, you know, be augmented, I guess, and it's even more difficult to fix. So yeah, it's about how do you bring all those things together. The player experience. How do we make sure that there is something for the players to do, that they have enough incentives to follow it, and there's enough reward for them to actually take the time to do it and spend it, which means making sure that we balance it against every other activity that exists in the game. And that's not just the ISK per hour, it has all other things around that, right? When we talk about experience, for example, well, it's not just the look and feel. It's more than that. It's what does the player get at the end of the day when he has fulfilled his goal, and how does that weigh against everything else that he could be doing in the game. So I guess in a way, it's making sure that you put all those things in a single basket and uh, make good choices.
Yeah, that's. I imagine that there are several things in game or that are upcoming that that might keep you up at night, or that you might worry about, depending on what type of person you are. But can you maybe share? I know there's probably some things down the line that you can't talk about yet, but what are some things that right now you're spending a lot of time with thinking about in the game, that you're thinking about balancing, that you think might be risky, that are difficult?
So there have been a few in the last 3.5 years, I guess. But the what is happening right now, I guess that probably keeps me no, not anymore. What it used to keep me late at night figuring out, okay, where do we go, is the changes we made with the industry fees, the whole revamp of how the ACI is being applied to the industry. How do we take this feature, this mechanic that I actually loved from the first time I realized that it exists and how it works,
Hmm.
which I think it's such an Eve mechanic. It's a dynamic formula that will change and will affect the ecosystem depending on what the players do. And I think that that's the core of how we need to think about when we make new systems in Eve. So we had to make changes because it didn't do what we wanted it to do. It wasn't hitting the mark, let's say. And at the same time, we have the in-game market where the sales taxes are number one faucet, number one sink,
Hmm.
and we need to figure a better way to balance that equation. It might sound very simplistic to say just balance sinks and faucets. It's definitely more complicated than it sounds, and it's not just about creating a new task or just increasing the sales tax and call it a day, because there's different things will be affected by doing one, and different things can be affected now when we created this the SEC, the surcharge
Hmm.
in the industry fees. So there's one more thing that we can play around and create a new balance around how the main sinks and faucets are balanced. And we're gonna have an update about that soon.
Okay, that's yeah, that's good. But with the we saw two things in the Viridian expansion, right? The tax reform on the one hand, that also saw the minimum tax lowered to 0% for citadels, right? The market tax, at least,
The
um,
pro-
the broker fees, and the industry job installation fee. Can you talk, like, what um, you alluded to that for a second ago, what the issue was there in the past, but can you say, in a few sentences, what the aim was by changing the job installation fees?
so there were multiple goals. One on the one hand, we wanted players to move around. We want them to spread.
Hmm.
And by the way, you might hear some of these goals being contradicting each other. That's the nature of it, if you ask me. But on one hand, we want players to move around. How do we do that? We capitalize on the fact, hey, the more you stay in one place, and the more stuff you create, and the more wealth you create in one space, we're trying to nudge you into, hey, maybe you should look somewhere else if you want to stay competitive with everyone else. And the competitive part is what is the main driving force behind these recent changes. Allow other people that, let's say, stay in a low index system, create stuff, manufacture, and not pay as much as and create wealth for themselves through the taxes that they will pose. and still stay competitive with the end result. Uh, on top of that, of course, you'll have to add bonuses that are coming from rigs. This is also another reason we removed the, I don't want to say archaic, but these old bonuses from an old change that existed that I don't think 90% of the players even knew existed. Those factors that existed in the research and the industry fee formulas.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we are creating a space to make even more changes now and to shift, let's say, where the isks the isk sinks should be. We'll get there gradually, of course, and that's why we created a sales tax reduction with Viridian. Make sure that there's not a huge shock in the economy. Also, make sure that we understand how the players will react with these changes. We definitely try not to go too far, and I think that will be evident with the next MER. But yeah, we're taking one step at a time now. We have created even more tools for us, and we will keep doing that. There's also the estimated item value part that needs some adjustment. Let's say many people have talked about it. The CSM has brought it up in last summit. It's not a new thing. We know that there's definitely something that needs tweaking there. So all these things we start getting some traction in figuring all those things, not figuring them out. I guess getting them into what the next state should be, because we've been dealing with, I guess, more major problems in the last years, and now it's I think it's finally time to get this out of the way.
One of that, you mentioned sinks and faucets. One of that, related issue there was, or a new change in Viridian was also the now the Excel structures not being able to be anchored in HiSec anymore, and thereby also the TTT going down. Which I have, I have two questions for you. For one is that in itself also reduces the an ISK faucet, or you reducing the an ISK sink, you reducing the tax on citadels, could have a massive impact on the ISK sinks if there's a large shift in especially the Plex and injector and extractor trade from citadels to NPC stations. Have you planned for that? Is there a contingency plan? And is that going as intended?
So that specific change is driven not by an economic train of thought.
Mm-hmm.
That change is driven from the fact that we believe Excel structures were an issue from day one.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about this. We
Yes.
almost implemented 3.5 years ago. But at the end of the day, this is a design decision. Like game design wise, if you want systems design wise, Excel structures shouldn't exist in HiSec. We shouldn't have made that happen ever. But that came to pass, and that's fine. This is game development. That you will have to deal with this all the time, and also it's 20 years of things that we need to bring together. But the decision was driven by the fact that these are the rules we want for HiSec. We don't want this thing to exist in HiSec, and it had nothing. Well, we definitely thought about the implications of the current establishment, but the fact that some people, let's say, I don't want to say took advantage, but they worked with the rule set that we gave them and they made a profit. That's fine. That's if, like, this is the sandbox. This is the sand we provided, and they made something out of that. That's cool. We didn't make this decision to bring down castles. We made this decision because we think that's the right decision for the rule set that governs HiSec. And we definitely talked internally about, okay, what does the next day look like? And there's definitely people that panic that, oh, what about this? And should we make sure that this or that wouldn't happen? At the end of the day, I remember telling them, hey, let's see what happened. We don't have to solve for every problem. And yes, this is something that we created, but let's apply the rule set, see how the players will behave, and we'll take it from there, because we don't always need to create exceptions. Like I prefer, if I can avoid having an exception in the game, I would always vote to not have an exception. and it's I think the way well, you've all seen how it ended up. I think
Mhm.
that's a valid and a very Eve-like outcome. So
So if I were you in that situation,
I hope I answered your question.
yeah, no, if I were you in that situation, I think if the TTT hadn't gone down after that, I think you would have probably had a bigger problem. I think this is the much better outcome for for CCP because now the problem is gone. If the problem had persisted, you would have had to defend against allegations that you took away something for the right reasons, the absolute right reasons, but also eliminated the opportunity for anyone putting up a competition. So if I were you in that situation, I would have made sure that I knew beforehand that the TTT would go down if you made that decision. Was there a meeting like that, or was there some sort of discussions around this?
Not, I mean, I shouldn't say, but not really. No one came to us and say, "Hey, just do this because we're gonna like." None of this really happened. But even if it did happen, no one can guarantee it. Like, if someone can come to me and say, "Hey, the moment you do this, we're just gonna break." Like, sure, okay. Do I believe them? Do I act as if their word is so?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that didn't really happen, but even if it did, we wouldn't have acted because of a promise. Let's say that that happened somewhere. This was all about, hey, what do we want for the next day? How do we want now Isaac to behave? Yes, if certain issues remained after the change we made and didn't take care, weren't taken care of, we could probably look into different solutions, but those solutions then would be about something very explicit that would be a problem in the current state of the game. Meaning there is a specific structure in HiSec, no one else can actually create one, so there is no way for someone to come and claim the same amount or try to take some wealth out of that. And that would have been a very different problem and a very different solution space systems wise. But the original goal, the original change was about no, we shouldn't be allowing this to happen. Yes, there is a few structures already there, but let's see what the next day, what's the story of the next day, and if we created more problems, or if we actually solved some of them, or if the players solved some of the problems that have been created.
The outcome's good though, right? I mean, the way that you must be at least partly happy about the way it went.
I'm happy because people are having fun, and I'm happy about the social aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
The people came together, and I think it illustrated what Eve is about. Seeing how the communication happened, seeing how people started talking about, hey, this is the next day, this is the new rule set, and there is an opportunity to do this and that. And you started seeing group of people coming together. You started seeing people coming back just for that, and I think that was interesting. That was amazing. But about the end result, I don't think I can comment that it could still be there. But if it was there, I guess we could discuss about what kind of issues that creates in the game.
Let's switch gears real quick away from the Viridian changes back to something that the trading community has been talking about, and that's the sales of extractors, for example, that we've seen that are quite massive. Now, I we all know that there's obviously CCP needs to make money. This is a game that costs money. That's like all that aside, that must be a big challenge to you and your role as a as the force of stability for the economy, or at least the guardian of the in-game economy. When there's something like a 50% drop in price for extractors, take us through that. What does that mean for you when you run a sale like that? How do you avoid this crashing certain parts of the market? Because the implications for the player base are very big.
Where do I start with that? I guess I'll start with we have a whole department that is doing the sales. Is looking into the monetization aspect of the game, and how we market certain things. But let's just talk about the monetization part, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that's on their end. They have certain goals, and the goals that that aim has are mostly driven by the business part of the company, right? It's not driven by what the in game what the game needs, let's say, as as part of the mechanics or the systems of it. It's driven by, hey, we need to make sure that we're here the next day. So there is a certain amount of balance, I guess, and certain amount of not questioning, but back and forth on figuring out, okay, what there's a discussion about what they need to, what they want to do, what they need to do, which how everything starts, and then, hey, what would the implication be, and can the in-game economy handle that? At which point is when they talk with me and they make sure that yes, we're okay, we can move forward and all that. So there's all that is happening behind the scenes, and it's gonna it's still gonna happen the next day and the day after, because at the end of the day we need to make sure we get money, we need to make sure that the business is profitable. Now on the implications part, there's I would say there's a certain amount of how far can we go with a few things. But when we talk specifically about uh, extractors, injectors, and I would just add plex into that part of items, we just need to make sure we take that outside of the main game economy. I think that that's what people have not take it out of the main economy.
Mm-hmm.
We make sure what we create, let's say, the levers that are separate from the rest of the in-game market. To put it in better words, for example, the taxation system right now is the same across the board. We've talked so many times about how we need to change that, and this is driven mainly because we need those items. We need to make sure we can control those items in a different form, in a different way than the rest of the eve economy, and the rest of the items that are being manufactured within the game. And even within those items, we would probably want to create different groups and create different taxation layers. But anyway, this is more about how we think about the future. The answer to your question, I guess, is more about, there is a certain amount of balance that is happening, and making sure that, okay, how far does an offer go, and should we just stop it? Should we just adjust it? Is it something that will create problems? Is it something that will create long-lasting problems? Yes, no, and if yes, what are those, and how far would they get us? All those things are what we kind of discuss and make sure that it is okay to move forward with such offers. But they're mainly driven from the business part. Ideally, they shouldn't have that kind of impact in the game, but yeah.
Is it a concern to you that so when simply from the in-game market perspective, I know I appreciate you trying to keep those items separately. One way you can't separate is that people will profit or even lose money a lot by trading in these items. So when you do a 50% off extractor sale, people like me might buy a trillion ISK worth of extractors. I bought more. When they drop by 50%, that must be something that that you can't do a lot about, but that's probably a downside of running those sales, right? Because it's going to be people like me benefiting a lot. It's not going to be your week 1, week 2 player benefiting from that.
I mean, that is true, but let's wait on what is that benefit, and what did it take for you to be able to
Mm-hmm.
have that benefit. You worked a lot in order to be able to be in a place that you can benefit from that. And for me, this is just playing the game, meaning, yes, you have enough in-game money to maybe make wealth out of make the capital work for you. In a way, it's
Mm-hmm.
how I could probably see it. I'm not sure. I don't think I want to comment on how, if it's a problem or how big of a problem is, but people that can people like you that,
Hmm.
let's say, they can profit from that is something that we consider and try to make sure that is this a bad thing? What kind of benefit does that actually give you? Because at the end of the day, and that's why I said ideally we would have these items separately so that we can probably balance how much of a profit you could get out of situations like that. But how do we weight that versus the business impact? That I think that's the big trade-off there. And yes, there are a few people like you, but there are people buying them, right?
Sure, and of course, there's people selling, there's people buying. I'm pretty sure not everyone's unhappy in that equation. And for me personally, I run a large investment fund, so my profits, at least I distribute them in the galaxy. But there's a lot of people that I think one of the community feelings about those sales is sometimes that it enables the rich to get richer. So uh, I don't think there's much you can do about it, and it's a sandbox, and it's like capitalism in the real world. This happens all the time. But that's another part of that extractor equation is skill farming, and so in terms of that whole relationship between the Plex price, the extractor price, and the injector price, and how people can, turn Plex into skill points and profit that way. Is that relationship something you monitor? So I would imagine that's one of the key things that you monitor because it drives so many things about the economy in EVE Online, even though those items are separately.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we monitor. It's the model that we have created that let's say creates the exchange rate between skill points, Plex, ISK, and the dollar. All those things are connected. And on top of that, we add different, let's say, characters, depending on the character that we're talking about. How does that equation change? And of course, we bring the skill injectors and extractors into the same equation, uh, mainly to figure out, okay, which kind of character would benefit the most, or how does that equation change depending on how many, let's say, skill points your character has. So we are definitely looking into that, and that's how we also um, create our monetization, let's say, part of some of the monetization models that we have. Uh, I don't think I want to get into more details about that, um, unless you want to ask something more specific.
No, I think I uh I haven't talked to you or Ratadi before about that specific relationship, and whether you monitor it, from a player perspective. We talk about that relationship all the time because it's always a question of, right now, is it profitable to quote unquote skill farm, what the player base calls skill farming, to open a bunch of accounts, and subscribe them with Plex, buy hopefully cheap extractors from a sale that you happen to be running, and then extracting LSI and selling them at the market for profit. In that process, having a whole bunch of quote unquote free Omega accounts. When that equation is profitable, that means inevitably, you're going to sell more Plex. The demand for Plex is going to be a lot higher. The cost of skill points is going to be lower. So, it has a lot of positive and negative effects for CCP's business, which is why it doesn't surprise me that you monitor that relationship.
Yeah,
And
and
that's why I'm asking.
on top of that, I mean, you're absolutely right. This is exactly what is happening, and I think the question we ask mostly is for how long is it profitable? Is it profitable? And how do we weight that versus the business part of the equation? Uh, I do want to add though on top of that where I think it gets really interesting and where so if you add on top of that the in-game activities and the amount of ISK that players make through those activities, then the equation becomes okay, depending on the ISK per hour that players can get from specific activities, you can actually get some kind of income for them through the same equation, right? And that is where we trying to go right now because we have 20 years of content that we're slowly trying to bring back together in that within that paradigm because we've seen that many people, and I know I'm changing the subject a bit,
Please.
like the politician that I'm not,
This is great.
but that's where we started saying, okay, why do people go and do specific things, and there might be a lot of reasons, but when the reason is because that's how they can maximize their is per hour, that's how they can maximize their wealth, then that gets us thinking, okay, that's there definitely a driving force behind that because of the equation that we just talked about because you can translate that into real money, but uh, how do we take that and make changes and adjust the rest of the game, or how can we make it, maybe depending on the goals, how do we make more people, how do we nudge more people to go into that direction, or how do we change specific activities in the game so that they become the same, not profitable, but as interesting for the players, so they would actually think, you know what, maybe I'll go there, it's less isk, but it's, I don't know, maybe a better experience. All those things, if you like, in Eve, if you put them down, it's just a huge list that probably will make your head hurt.
Hmm.
But we're slowly trying to make sure that we sanitize that space. And you might have seen that with the Viridian expansion. There's a lot of new content coming out from the Homefront stuff, and I need to actually give kudos to all of the designers in CCP because if every single one of them, like game designers, narrative designers, they're all literal in economics. They understand what fundamentals are and how their choices can affect the game. And we always go into this back and forth. Okay, have you checked your inputs? What is the experience that you want, and then how do you balance that versus the things that the players will get into the activity, like the cost. In a way, you could say how much money are they going to get out of that, and how much time will they spend, and how difficult it is. And then within all that, make sure that that sits in the place compared to the rest of the activities that is okay. And if it's not, because every model that you can have before release will break and can break the moment you set it out there, then there's the iterative process where they go back and say, okay, yeah, we need to fix that, we need to make sure that this is not really where we want to be. uh, an example would be Potsdam. We made some changes last year. We had to adjust because they didn't really do what we needed from Potsdam at the end of the day. People were having fun, so the discussion at the end of the day needs and has to go back to that. Do the players have fun? Are they having a good time in it? And I know that's very different from what you would like to hear, like from the market perspective, but
Hmm.
it definitely has an impact on that too, because that's
So,
how it gets into the game.
so if you're, Parchman was a good example. Another example that I'm sure you're thinking about lately is C5, C6 wormholes. We saw in the MER, I don't, what was it, 25 trillion in blue loot exported in 1 month. That's Tell me that's on your radar.
It's
And
been
I'm
for a
sorry,
while.
wormhole people. I'm sorry, wormhole people.
I think we've talked about this before. And yes, it's been, I want to say for at least a year. It's been in our radar, but you know how it is with priorities, with limited resources. I'm not saying that we're going to do something tomorrow. I'm not saying that we're going to do something in a month. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that we are aware and we have discussed about what exactly is happening there and trying to figure out let's say the second and third degree effects that this kind of situation has. But I think at the end of the day, depending on how some things go, we are going to, at some point, maybe do something about it.
Um,
Was that generic enough?
that was
So
good. Yeah, I mean, I know the we're not going to do something this week or this month. That's the standard answer that you'll probably do something at some point. But that's me saying it. What, so you're saying that everyone's keeping the economy in mind. Then I have one question that I always thought was a little out of whack, and that is things like, for example, if you're looking at ships like the Macarial, um, nobody in their right mind makes a Macarial from a BPC right now, because you can buy it much cheaper by just using LP. And obviously, there's something at some point. It didn't always used to be like that. I guess in a healthy system, for that specific item, you would have that fluctuating. Like sometimes LP is cheaper, sometimes the production is cheaper. For some ships, it's like the Macarial. It's completely out of whack right now. How does how does that happen ideally, if you can answer that? Is that something that you then say, okay, this is only 1% of the game, so that's okay? Or do you look at that and you say, yeah, that's an issue, we got to fix that?
it depends. I think the way you describe this specific example is definitely an issue one, and we do talk internally about, hey, if this is a thing, then there's no actual choice. If there is no meaningful choice, then by default that is a problem, because either the choice shouldn't exist or we should make it a meaningful choice. And these are the discussions that we try to create and see how do we get to fix these kind of issues. As I said, this is definitely not on the top of the priority list. It's also part of a bigger discussion that is happening for quite some time now about the LP. We have made a few changes. I'm not going to spoil anything for the future, so let me think how I should phrase that. We are thinking about how do we get into the next day of loyalty points, and
Mm-hmm.
and that affects the loyalty point stores too, right?
Mm-hmm.
That has to affect them too. In essence, also that probably will mean that we need to make some adjustments in the offers, depending in that case mostly on the design goals, and that's I think where the thing becomes even more interesting, because depending on the kind of offers, if there is it, are we talking about just ISK, are we talking about items that we need to the players need to turn in, are these items new? Remember what I said about when we create new markets, when we create new, we ask for players to find those new items. That's an opportunity we have to control that part of the market. But for the things that exist and have been there for a while, it's a bit more difficult to decide what approach we should be taking.
I mean, is it a I wonder, like do the this might be too much detail for you, but do the halls need to be in the LP store? Why aren't there just BPCs? Because you would think that the create, because putting the halls in there removes the demand on raw materials. It removes like 80% of the gameplay around it. So you would
So
say,
the answer to that is it has to be on the design spectrum. And why I'm saying that, because we can definitely make a sane choice based on the economics behind it. But if you think about it from a player perspective and what the designers would think when they create ships that are only available, let's say through the LP store, then you have to think about that instant gratification that some players need to have, because they're playing a game and they want to have access to a ship right now, because they're not doing any manufacturing, they're not doing any blueprints, they don't care about going to a station, getting resources. They just, that just is not their thing. So we need to cater for those people too, give them an avenue so they can have immediate access to what they need. At the same time, you would say, well, isn't that what the regional market is about? And yes, I think that's where that discussion becomes interesting, and that's where the options become a bit blurry. And you ask how do we move forward with this? Because I could totally make a case that the house shouldn't exist in the LP store. You only need the blueprints. If someone wants a blueprint, they should just get in there, buy it, create it, and then and sell it on the market. But then I have to play devil's advocate. They say, well, what if no one cares about making that chip? Because you know what, industrialists care about profit, and this specific, let's say, SIP isn't profitable enough. Then that SIP won't exist in the game. That creates a different problem for the players that want to actually fly that SIP. And as I said, the moment we move into the spectrum of between the economics part and the game design part, that's I think that's also where the magic happens. But that's also where the solution space and the problem space becomes a bit challenging, I would say.
So I hear what you say. My counter argument would be, if if people want to fly that ship, somebody will produce it if the price gets high enough. And that problem is much better in my view than the problem we have right now, which is nobody cares about producing it at all, and nobody even gets involved into one of the most, up until recently, one of the most popular ships in the game, like the Macarial. And this is all these are a lot of the faction ships have this issue. But it's, I think, yes, there's facets to it. There's pros and cons. For that one, I've just never really understood the benefit of just keeping the holes in there, because the drawback is so high. But I have to assume you have your reasons.
It's not easy to take back something that is already out there. And that's why I'm going back to what I said. When we the opportunity, what you said would be very easy for us to do when we create a new market. If that was a new ship, we could make sure that what you said is how it would go out, how it would roll. But when you have a heritage of 20 years or even less,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter, however long some things have been out there, then those complicate the solution spectrum, because it means that you might need to make some more difficult uh, decisions, and that is something that needs to be weighted with, well, are we actually getting what we need out of that difficult decision that we're going to be making? And we've made some very difficult decisions in the past. So I would say that this specific issue, we can talk about it, we can look into it. I think we can agree on the theory. I think the actual solution is just a bit more. The solution space is a bit more blurry than it would ideally be.
I mean, I know our community. Anytime you take things away, it's a problem. I totally totally get that. I think in this case, me personally, I would bite the bullet. But I totally understood. On let's go back to Viridian for a second here and talk about another change that you did, and that was specifically the reduction of the items used in some of the blueprints, targeting the manufacturing price of capital ships. So clearly, and that's, I talked to Ratati in March the last time, and he had already hinted at that, which led to, I think, a lot of panic selling of capitals. But we've seen it now. So I would, if I look at the manufacturing prices, I would expect capitals to drop in pricing. I don't know, somewhere 10 to 20%. It looks like, as they should be dropping. Most of them aren't dropping in price. So I don't know what people are doing. They're not, But that's also Eve for you. But is that like 10-20%? Does that sound like the where you wanted them to be? Is that still not enough?
I'll try to get into answering your question, but I want to get some context first. We're
Please.
not usually, we never look into items that are being manufactured in the game and we say, oh, they need to cost X, Y, or Z. We usually don't do that. We definitely have a spectrum, a range within which we would like those items to be, but we never say, oh, you know what, this item needs to be at 2 billion. We don't say there is a need for something to be, because that means then we'll need to actually not use one hand but all the hands to you know change the economy, and then agency goes away. So getting that out of the way, the spectrum does exist for capital ships. We're not there yet. What we're trying to do for a while now is tackle each of the bottlenecks that exist. I would say one thing, well, not one thing at a time, as many as we can at a time. until we get into the place that we want to be. And what does that mean? Oh boy, now you're taking 3 years back when we started this whole thing with the changes with the resources, and then some years later with the industry. Those things were like a big plan that started. I don't know, 2019 December. I don't even remember anymore. And there was a very specific end state. We wanted to get at a place that this will work the same way the SCI works. It's a dynamic system that will self-regulate in a way. What does that mean? That means resources in the game will be there will be a dynamic way to distribute resources in the game. Of course, that's a huge task. And back then, we set into a three-phase program. I think, if I remember correctly. And the last part was, okay, let's make sure that we get at the end of this journey, we get at the place where we are within the boundaries that we think are a healthy place for the in-game economy to be. And that is mainly driven from the resources, like the uh, protogenes, that's a Greek word, I guess. So from the resources that get into the game, the resources that the players just mine and harvest
Mm-hmm.
and get into the game. And that equation, we changed that equation. We took away things from space, we took away things from null-sec, we placed things in low-sec, and that's how we created the isogen noxium bottleneck. So the next part of that journey is, okay, how do we expand one step at a time, because now we want to approach this from the low end. We don't want to overshoot. We don't want to get back on the problems we had in the past. We want to make sure that we slowly can find a way that the amount of players that we have and the behavior that those players have, meaning the miners, how many miners do we have, where are they exactly located, can sustain what we think the healthy place of the economy is. And we're not there yet, of course. And yes, we can always say that the capital prices, I'm going to talk about the dredge specifically, uh, can be a driving force behind that. But the changes that we actually want to do, they always involved nullsec. Now, again, back in the day, we made changes and we need to go back and adjust the things we did, because we need to complete that part of the equation. We need to complete that part of the plan. We need to give stuff back into nullsec. The way we want to do that, because the dynamic resource distribution system is something that exists as an idea, but with everything else that is happening, it's not really a possibility at this point. We can't really say that, yeah, we were gonna bring that into the game in a year's time, because no one can wait for that. So we're taking one step at a time, and now we're focusing on, or we will be focusing on, in the future or in the near future. Don't take my word for it.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I'm just saying what is a potential future for us. Go back and look into nullsec and say, okay, what is the current, and what's the current state of nullsec? And that's not going to be just about resources. It's going to be about, what do we want out of that space? What do we want out of player sovereignty? What do we want out of players creating infrastructure? What does that mean? How do we make sure that we also create conflict with that? How do we change the rules of engagement? How do we change the rules of nullsec so that it's both uh, good for players to get in there? They can create wealth, they can make profit, but at the same time they have to defend it. And we have another group of people that say, this is interesting enough for me to, and not too risky to try to get in there, and I don't know, make pillage and get stuff some out of the infrastructure that people have created. I'm trying to hint into the things that are currently, or have we've been talking about these things for quite some time. Let's be honest, this is not anything new, and Radar has talked about this in the past. So I would say that's where this will be solved eventually, because some of the bottlenecks can't be solved just by increasing what you already have
Mm-hmm.
there. Meaning, sure, we can increase hydrogen in low sec, but overshoot, and then you're creating a cartel in low sec, and that has existed in the past with some other stuff. So the solution space, again, on the next step, we need to take into account how much did we move the needle, and we did move the needle with Viridian, and then say, okay, we went from step 5 to step 6, we move the needle that much. What's the next place that we need to look? Are we content with the wealth generation that currently is happening in low-sec, for example? Yes, no, maybe. Are we not content with the wealth generation that's happening in other places? What about logistics? Like there's again, the solution space is so big that it needs to be considered within other aspects of the game. That's why I'm bringing in, sovereignty, infrastructure. I've talked in the past probably about the iHub upgrades and how those are currently work. So there's a big, I want to say, space for us to work within to get where we need to be.
So one thing I'm hearing out of it as well is that these types of blueprint changes that we just saw, those are more, the brute force things that you really don't want to do. That's the last resort, right? What you rather would do is slowly remove the bottlenecks as they come up. I think you mentioned isogen. You just released a lot more isogen into low-sec with the latest expansion. That dropped the price down from, I don't know, 600 to 500, more or less. So what I'm hearing you say is, yeah, that's fine, but probably not enough.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying.
And that's not the
Don't
only,
take
certainly not the only one.
advice by someone on the internet, by the way. I'm not suggesting that we're gonna make a change the next month or so. So please don't.
No,
Uh,
I mean, Rattati mentioned it in March that isogen was, was an issue, or one of the issues. I think it's clear to anyone looking at the economy from top down is that clearly, if you look at historic pricing and if you look at the way that these blueprints were designed, isogen is a much higher proportion now than it's probably intended to be. So I think that's not a surprise.
I would say historic pricing is not. Maybe it's not too accurate to base.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I to base the current state, because if you look 10 years ago, that you get a very different situation. What we're looking at is with the current availability, which is what we control, the availability of the resources, and take no matter what the theoretical model tells us, the question is, okay, the moment we give X amount of resources out there, or we make available, if to make it more accurate, X resources out there available, what do the players do? What's the players' behavior? And that's why I talked about that is the point we bring in, okay, the other aspects of the game, because we talked about centralizing resources. I said, okay, we know what we did with low-sec. It was a design that said put the bottleneck there, see how things evolve there, see if we get an actual vibrant ecosystem out of that place, if this is going to be a driving force, and then take the next step, because it's a different thing talking about availability, and I just think availability is a different thing, and then you have supply and of course demand. But supply is what the players really control at the end of the day. As long as the availability exists, the supply is what the players really control. And if I think it's proven that if something is generating enough wealth, they will actually go down there and mine that thing and make it available.
You would hope so. You would hope so. So independently of isogen, uh, one of the issues that that you probably see because you have visibility on all the data that we don't have is, it might be that enough isogen is entering or is out there overall, but it's just concentrated in a few pockets. You mentioned a cartel. It could be just people just sitting, just just because they like sitting on it, and here and there we hear stories, of course, that exactly that is happening. Is that something where you go, yeah, I mean, it's a sandbox. It's what they do. Kind of like you answered the question about if somebody made 1 trillion in the past, then more power to them. Is do you look at that and say, oh gosh, we got to do something about that, or do you say, oh look at them, good on them?
It depends. Without saying if this is actually happening on or when or for which resources, for example, we definitely look into that. And I think actually our biggest driving force is how wealth is generated. And okay, you could say is at the top, but the same goes for resources. And then the way the resources are uh, accumulated by different, let's say, groups, then we also weight how many of those resources are actually available. Is it an actual availability bottleneck? Is it the problem because people don't want to actually go out there and mine? Or is it the problem because people just want to sit and create their inventories? The last, if it is actually happening, we take it very seriously if it creates an actual problem. For example, in the past, inventories have been created, but there was still enough people that they could find that resource and put it on the market, and it was still within those boundaries that I talked about. It was still in boundaries that meant, yeah, this is maybe a bit expensive, but it's still okay. If we feel that something is going overboard, is just going in a place that we don't consider healthy, then we might need to do something about it. But the answer as to what would we do is not that simple because it depends. As I said, okay, hydrogen is an issue, but what are the solutions? Because we now created the, let's say, done the second or third step by increasing the availability in the existing space. We increased the space, by the way, that hydrogen was available back in November, and the next step might be something else, and that's where I bring back sovereignty. That's where I bring back the initial solution to the entire spectrum of resources, which I think we definitely talked about this at some point, maybe 3 years ago. We want to allow, to a degree, players to decide what they want to have, what they want to, uh, what resources they want to, let's say, harvest. In a way, it's still there's no solution yet, of course, on that end, because that means we would have implemented a new system. But that is the line that we're thinking about solving this at the end of the day, because this is how we, at the end of the day, create opportunity for other people to go in there, probably, and steal it, as long as we make sure that is not something that you can have, the uh, I don't know how to put it. As long as we make sure that I don't want to say easily defendable. I want to say monopolized.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is also a big discussion because that means where is it available? If we give it, if that's on the player's hand, meaning they can choose, well, what kind of options do they have? Because if the option is, oh, just do it anywhere, like for example, the way the current indexes work, well, that doesn't give us much because we can't really control anything around that.
This, I must say, this has been some great insights, Psych. We definitely have to do that this again. I have a few more general questions away from the Viridian expansion, just more in general. But I also want to ask chat. I saw some questions fly by. If you have some questions that are that some burning questions for Psych, you can put them in chat. I'll try to pick some out. Make sure you highlight my name, and you can do that while I'll ask some more general questions. I was wondering, Psych, if you compare Eve to other games. Now I don't think you've had this exact position for another game, but I'm sure you talk to people in the industry. What are the challenges that you see in Eve Online and in your job that that other games just don't understand, like the complexity of where you're like, no, this is me, just me, because only Eve can do this.
So the fact that the the models that we create for the economy of Eve, they can't be broken because they're not. In most games, those models are contained, meaning take any random mobile game, right? I can create the theoretical model behind its economy and make sure that I will be within a 5% deviation of the outcome, guaranteed, because that's how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, that's also my background from creating math for slot machines. It's you can guarantee that you create a model that works within specific boundaries. With Viv, you can do that. You have to do that. You have to create your model. I think that is necessary every time. You need to create your theoretical model, but the moment you put it out there, you need to sit down, see, go back into the data-driven approach and say, okay, what did the players do? How did the players behave with this model, and how do I need to adjust that model? And that is just a ongoing thing. That's just continuously happening and needs to be happening for every most ideally everything we have in it, but let's be fair, that will take a huge amount of resources. So I think the biggest challenge is making sure that we understand that part, make sure that we go back and fix things, and making decisions on how do we prioritize all that, because everything will need some kind of adjustment. Few years down the line, few months down the line, it's just an ongoing thing. There's a there's no static model in Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Then and that's definitely different from many other or most other games. On top of the, if you put into the equation the social aspect and how people come together and what that means, and then bring in the not only the behavior of that, but bring in the fact that you want new players, you want to business wise go into different expand your player base. You need to make sure that also the experience is great. And I'm not just talking about the visuals, which I think are absolutely amazing. And if I'm talking about how do you make sure that the candidate or the potential candidates will see something in Eve now, that they will say, you know what, yeah, I want to try that, and then get into that cycle of uh, I would say the beautiful word of the social aspect behind Eve, and how you can just go into a corporation and then magic happens. Uh, all of this combined, I mean, sometimes they just have to keep you awake, I guess, to figure out some kind of balance between all those
It's definitely
parameters.
unique. Crota in chat has a very good question that I like. What was the most unexpected outcome to the in-game economy from a system change? Positive or negative? Is there one from the past that sticks out?
Ooh, can I answer that the next time? It's a beautiful.
Sure. Sure, you can come and chat next week and
Maybe you know what? I'm gonna go with the expected result of the changes we did in Viridian with the taxation. Uh, Oh, by the way, here's one for you. I have the new MER. Maybe
oh, look at that.
you just choose one slide and I can provide it. Just saying. But yeah, definitely I think the way the outcome of the changes we made with the taxation, the industry taxation and the sales tax with Viridian, which is, by the way, the I want to remind everybody why we said the sales tax is not a permanent thing. We
Mm-hmm.
just want to make sure that we don't take up the economy too much. We just need to make sure what the next day means with the updated industry fees and the removal of the manufacturing and research factors. So that part, I guess it was more well. At the same time, it wasn't that unexpected because it was all left to the players to decide. In a way, we just made sure that we're not going beyond a certain threshold. So maybe that's not even the most unexpected thing. I don't know. I need to come back to you, I guess. uh,
I could give you a hint. What I like there's two things that I still talk about that I felt they maybe not like I think they were unexpected for you because they probably didn't work out as it intended. One is the whole um sometimes there's in-game login awards like the Signal 25s that dropped in price, but that's something that happened three years ago, where you have in-game markets crashing because there's just items being given away for free. That's probably not intended, but it's it's to be expected.
Sorry, what?
So it's a more recent example would be the Master at Arms cerebral accelerators, for example, that are from the that were given away for the retroactive recruiter friend codes. Like sometimes in-game markets crash because you just it's a well-intended idea, but then from an economy side, it's got to piss you off.
I don't want to comment on that one because anything I say, it's going to be used against me.
Yeah.
Well, unexpected. Well, yeah. So next question.
Yeah.
I don't want to go there. It's
one question I'll let you get away with that. One question that came up that I've been also wondering. I think we saw several parts of the game being revamped now, most recently very successfully, arguably the faction warfare. Mission running, like level 4 missions, they've been the same for a long time, and I think people are still doing them, but they would definitely be they would be up for a remodel. Anything you can share in terms of is it on your calendar? Are
I
you
mean,
doing it right now?
we've been talking about missions for forever. If you want to talk specifically about the force, I guess the solution space there. We don't have to to examine what the problem space is, but the solution space is sure revamping the mission. I think is a must. But at the end of the day, there's many different things that we need to consider, and I will start with the technology, the engineering behind missions. Like, how do we want, like, if we say that, hey, we have an opportunity to revamp this part of the game, then I think, and it's something that actually has been is being discussed internally for quite some time now, is how can we make our life easier for the future? How can we somehow not delete, but I'm gonna go with delete some of the technical and the design that exists in it, because let's face it's 20 years. It's inevitable that you have things there that they're working, but they've been working since 20 years ago. So the question is, what do we want to fix? If we're fixing the economy part of it, then okay, we need to go back into the discussion we had earlier. How do we make sure that the wealth generation from those missions is in par with the same kind of activities that have the same kind of difficulty and the same kind of effort, so that they are considered a meaningful choice to actually pursue instead of doing something else? And that maybe is something that we can easily do by not changing the content, but only changing maybe the rewards. I don't think that is gonna get us much though.
Mm-mm.
So every time these kind of discussions happen, we always go back. Well, the content needs to be updated. We need to make sure that we create something that is more interesting for the players. At that time, uh, it's inevitable to ask, well, how do we get there? So right now we are having some discussions about how we can create a new type of I don't want to say a new way of thinking behind how content is being created. And uh, if and when that's going to happen, I don't know. Missions will definitely benefit from that. If we do something with missions before that comes to passes, I don't know. Probably, maybe right now the focus that I think the teams have is very specific. Now, right now, it's all about empowering corporations. So
Mm-hmm.
the resources need to go there. It's all about making sure that the LP makes sense, make sure that we allow players to um, express themselves. And from our end, we want to continue what we started with the November expansion and faction warfare. We want to take the next step and then probably look into what how do we create a more vibrant nullsec. So mission running, yes, we're talking about them. We understand the issues, but I'm not sure how if they're at at the top of the priority list or even at the
Fair enough.
middle of that
So
list.
high commander in chat, he's tried like three. I'm pretty sure that this is not in your wheelhouse, but he's tried 3 times. So we'll let him have this question. He's asking about the Eve Portal app that has apparently been having some issues. I can't speak to it because I honestly don't use it. I'm sorry. But is there, I know that there hasn't been a lot of updates to it. Can you say anything to that, Psych? Like, is that still on the agenda?
I don't know. I don't know. Honestly, that's definitely not something that I have in my like, vision. So I can't comment.
Okay. Uh, is there a player activity? What sort of player activity do you see as undesirable for the in-game economy? Is there something where you look at what players do and you say this is just not good for the game?
I'm not gonna answer that.
You know, I mean, there's there there's some things you could say, but I'll accept that because it's a. I mean, you don't want to alienate anyone, and theoretically, I'll answer that question for you, right? I'll give Crota an answer that I think that you could give. Um, it's a sandbox, right? And in the end, anything that you're going to say is undesirable is just a problem with the rule set, really. So, in the end, you make tweaks to the rule set, and everything that is left over is really the harsh reality that it's EVE Online. And we could probably discuss just on that question for about 3 hours more.
Okay, I guess here's one. It's not an activity, but well, Excel structures should exist in HiSec. That's one. And I guess another thing that well, I can give you two things. That again, I'm not answering your question. I'm just probably telling you what kind of changes I would like to see. One is the way indexes work. This thing with the industry index, that's all about mining. I think all the incentives there are wrong, and that is, you know, included in the conversation in the theme that I presented earlier about nullsec. And the other one is I hate it when mechanics are not they're not consistent. And one example, just and I'm gonna leave it there, is remote repair. That formula doesn't take into account a few things like the signature radius. So uh, I just I hate that thing. I don't know. It's it's weird when you have a tracking formula that was a certain way. And anyway,
Yeah.
I'm not answering your question, but I guess I'm talking about what I would like to probably see in the future.
There was one question in chat that I'm also I think the way the question is framed, I'm going to change it a little bit, but talking about PI or whatever it is called now. I know somebody told me the other day it's not called PI anymore, but planetary interaction, the production of planetary commodities. Let's call it that. The question in chat was, what do you think about it? I think the incentivation not working out or something like that. I think the question is like, I'm going to change the question a little bit because I don't think you're trying to incentivize PI right now. I think it's more about fixing supply chain issues right now with the volume change and the changing of P1 to P2 in some of the blueprints. So that's more logistical challenges and quality of life improvements rather than incentivizing people to do PI. But
Correct.
I want to build on that question because PI, it does feel like something that is, living out there, kind of, it's some people take it very seriously and it's an integral part of the economy, but it's still something that feels, a bit detached and also a bit tedious at sometimes. Like it feels like there are some low hanging fruits there that could be tackled. How about that? Is that somewhere in the roadmap? When can we expect to do PI on our mobile apps?
So here's my answer. I think that's the one thing that I don't believe it happens often when we talk about Eve, that if you ask anybody, developer or someone from the community, they will all agree on what the solution is. I think everybody will agree, at least if not on the exact solution, they will agree on what needs to happen and what the solution space is. Um, PI has some issues that they can't be fixed unless the significant amount of time is spent to fix them, and it's more about how the players experience the whole process. So I know that we've talked about this in the past. There's a lot of people inside the company that would love to see that change happening. Again, I think it's more of a prioritization question rather than what is the solution or what needs to happen. So if it's on the list, probably not. But things change. Next week it might get on the list because.
All right. Perfect. I think we're over an hour in. I probably, I don't know if I mentioned it to you specifically, but I asked for an hour, so you're already spending a good chunk of your Saturday evening with us, which I highly appreciate it. Is there anything that you want to share, Psych, that you want to tell the community about Viridian or anything else?
I don't know. I hope people. It seems that everybody's enjoying the new releases. I would just say keep an eye on what's coming. There's a lot more things that we're working on for the near future, and as I said, there are a lot of things that we are thinking about and discussing about. The thing after the near future. So just stay tuned.
All right. Well then, thanks so much again. Hopefully we can do this again sometime. There was some really great information here, and I really enjoyed the discussion. So hopefully come back, and we'll let you get back to your Saturday evening. We're going to continue the stream, so Psych, you can just drop off, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.